The stars were burning. Captain Jake Morrison had seen many things in his 20 years of space travel, but he had never seen anything like this. From the bridge of the USS Liberty, he watched two massive alien fleets tear each other apart. In the cold darkness of space, the Centauri ships looked like giant crystals floating through the void. They were beautiful in a deadly way, with sharp edges that caught the light from nearby stars. When they fired their weapons, beams of pure energy shot out like lightning, turning whatever they hit into glowing dust. On the other side were the Vulcan ships. These looked more like living creatures than machines. Their hulls moved and shifted like skin, and when they attacked, they launched swarms of small flying things that ate through metal and crystal alike. Morrison had been mining asteroids in the Kepler system when the war started 3 weeks ago. His crew of 43 people were supposed to be looking for rare metals to take back to Earth. Instead, they found themselves watching the biggest space battle anyone had ever seen. "Captain," said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her spot at the communications desk, "I'm picking up more transmissions from both fleets. The translation computer is having trouble, but it sounds like they're both claiming victory." Morrison looked at the tactical screen. Hundreds of ships were fighting across 3 different star systems. Every few minutes, another bright flash would light up the darkness as someone's ship exploded. Both sides kept bringing in more ships, and the fighting just got worse. "How many dead so far?" Morrison asked. Rodriguez checked her numbers. "Best guess is around 200 million, sir. The Centauri hit 3 Vulcan colonies yesterday. The Vulcans responded by releasing some kind of biological weapon that turned a whole Centauri fleet into space dust." Commander Pete Jackson shook his head. He was Morrison's second in command, and he had been in the military longer than anyone else on the ship. "This is insane, Captain. Neither side can win, but neither side will quit. They're going to kill everyone in this part of the galaxy." Morrison had to agree. The Centauri Empire had ruled this part of space for thousands of years. They were proud and strong, with technology that could crack planets in half. The Vulcan Confederacy was newer, but just as dangerous. Their ships were alive, and they could adapt to any weapon used against them. When the two sides first met 6 months ago, everyone thought they would find a way to share space. Both were advanced civilizations with art, science, and culture. But something went wrong during the first diplomatic meeting. No one knew exactly what happened, but within days, both sides were building war fleets. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Bobby Chun from the tactical station, "long-range sensors are picking up another battle group jumping into the system. Looks like Centauri reinforcements." Morrison watched as 30 more crystal ships appeared in flashes of blue light. They immediately began moving toward a group of Vulcan bioships that were trying to repair themselves after the last battle. The Liberty was hidden behind a large asteroid, using its mining equipment to stay invisible. Morrison's orders from Earth Command were clear: watch and report, but do not get involved. Humanity was still new to this part of space, and they could not afford to make enemies of either side. But watching was getting harder every day. "Captain," Rodriguez said quietly, "I'm getting emergency signals from civilian ships caught in the battle zone. Both sides are treating them as enemy targets." Morrison saw the tactical display update. 3 cargo ships and what looked like a passenger liner were trying to escape the fighting. Centauri and Vulcan warships were chasing them, firing warning shots that were getting closer and closer to direct hits. "Those are neutral ships," Jackson said. "Neither side should be targeting civilians. Tell that to them," Chun replied. "I'm reading weapons lock from both fleets. They're not taking any chances." Morrison felt his hands clench into fists. The rules of war that humans followed said that civilian ships should be protected. But these aliens seemed to think that anyone not on their side was an enemy. The communication system crackled to life. Admiral Lisa Hayes appeared on the main screen, her image coming from Earth Command headquarters 40 light years away. She looked tired, and Morrison could see the stress lines around her eyes. Captain Morrison, this is a priority transmission. You are to maintain your current position and continue observing the conflict. Under no circumstances are you to engage either alien faction. Earth's survival depends on staying neutral in this war. Morrison wanted to argue, but he knew Hayes was right. Earth had only 12 ships like the Liberty, designed for exploration and mining, not fighting. Against the thousands of warships the aliens had, humanity would last about 5 minutes in a real battle. Understood, Admiral, Morrison replied. We'll continue to monitor and report. Hayes nodded. Good. And Captain, I know this is hard to watch, but remember that our job is to survive and learn. Maybe someday we can help bring peace to this region. But not today. The transmission ended, leaving Morrison staring at the tactical display. Another battle was starting near the 4th planet in the system. Centauri crystal ships were forming into perfect geometric patterns, while Vulcan bioships moved like a school of fish, darting and weaving through space. They're so different, Dr. Karen Phillips said from the science station. She was the ship's expert on alien life, and she had been studying both sides since the war started. The Centauri think like a machine. Everything is precise, organized, following ancient rules. The Vulcans are more like a living organism. They adapt and change, but they can't seem to plan very far ahead. Morrison watched the battle unfold. The Centauri ships fired in perfect timing, their energy beams creating a deadly light show. The Vulcan ships split apart and reformed, launching clouds of living weapons that sought out their targets like hungry animals. It's like watching two different kinds of intelligence fight, Phillips continued. Neither side understands how the other thinks. That's why this war won't end. They can't predict each other well enough to win a decisive victory. Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up from her station. Captain, I'm detecting distress signals from that passenger liner. They've taken damage and are losing atmosphere. Morrison could see the ship on his screen. It was spinning slowly, leaking air and debris. The nearest Centauri patrol was only 10 minutes away, and they had already classified the liner as a potential threat. How many people on board? Morrison asked. Sensors show about 300 life signs, sir. Mixed species, probably refugees from the outer colonies. Morrison felt something cold settle in his stomach. 300 people were about to die, and there was nothing he could do about it without starting a war between Earth and the aliens. Captain, Jackson said quietly, the Centauri patrol is powering up weapons. They're not stopping to investigate. Morrison watched the crystal ships approach the helpless liner. In 2 minutes, those 300 refugees would be dead, and the war would claim more innocent victims. He thought about Admiral Hayes and her orders to stay neutral. He thought about Earth and its small fleet of exploration ships. He thought about humanity's place in a galaxy full of ancient, powerful civilizations. Then he thought about 300 people who were about to die for no good reason. Bobby, Morrison said, his voice steady and calm, plot an intercept course for that passenger liner. Amy, open a channel to the Centauri patrol. Jackson looked at him with surprise. Captain, our orders. Our orders are to observe and survive. Morrison replied, but we're still human beings. And human beings don't watch innocent people get murdered without doing something about it. The Liberty moved out from behind its asteroid, heading toward a collision course with destiny. The Liberty moved through space like a metal arrow, heading straight for the damaged passenger liner. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the Centauri patrol ships getting closer to their target. His heart was beating fast, but his hands were steady on the controls. 30 seconds to intercept. Lieutenant Bobby Chun called out from his station. The Centauri ships are charging their main weapons. Morrison opened a communication channel to the alien patrol. Centauri. Vessels, this is Captain Morrison of the human ship Liberty. The damaged vessel you are targeting is a civilian refugee ship with 300 innocent people aboard. Stand down immediately. The reply came back in the harsh, musical language of the Centauri, which the computer translated into English. Human vessel, you have no authority in this sector. The damaged ship has entered a combat zone and is therefore a legitimate target. Withdraw or face the consequences. Morrison looked at the tactical display. The Centauri patrol consisted of 3 crystal ships, each one twice the size of the Liberty. Their weapons could probably destroy his ship in a single shot. But Morrison had spent his whole life in space, and he knew something about physics that the aliens might not expect. Amy, he said to Lieutenant Rodriguez, patch me through to the refugee ship. A new voice came over the speakers, speaking in broken English with a strange accent. Human ship, this is Captain Vex of the merchant vessel Star Wanderer. We are carrying families from the destroyed colonies. Our engines are damaged, and we cannot escape. Please help us. Morrison could hear the fear in the alien captain's voice. He looked around his bridge at his crew. Commander Pete Jackson was checking weapon systems. Dr. Corinne Phillips was monitoring the refugee ship's life support. Everyone was waiting for his decision. Bobby, Morrison said, target the lead Centauri ship's weapons array. Don't destroy them, just disable their main guns. Captain, Jackson said quietly, if we fire on them, we're at war with the Centauri Empire. Earth Command will not be happy. Morrison thought about Admiral Hayes and her orders to stay neutral. Then he thought about 300 refugees who had already lost their homes and were about to lose their lives. Maybe it's time humanity stopped being neutral, Morrison said. Fire. The Liberty's railguns were designed for mining asteroids, but they worked just as well on crystal armor. The magnetic acceleration system launched metal projectiles at incredible speed, hitting the lead Centauri ship's weapon ports with perfect accuracy. The crystal ship's main guns went dark. Sparks flew from the impact points, and the elegant ship began spinning as its systems tried to compensate for the damage. Direct hit, Chun reported. Their primary weapons are offline. The Centauri response was immediate. The other 2 ships changed course, heading straight for the Liberty with their weapons charging. Morrison could see energy building up in their crystal cores, preparing to fire. Evasive maneuvers, Morrison ordered. Use the refugee ship as cover. The Liberty dove behind the damaged liner, just as the Centauri ships fired. Beams of pure energy passed through the space where the human ship had been a second before. The shots were so close that the hull temperature rose 10 degrees. Return fire, Morrison said. Target their engines. The Liberty's guns spoke again, sending more projectiles toward the crystal ships. One shot hit an engine nacelle, causing a brilliant explosion that sent the Centauri vessel tumbling out of control. The other shot missed, but it got the aliens' attention. Incoming transmission from the Centauri flagship, Rodriguez reported. The main screen showed a Centauri commander. The alien looked like a tall, thin human made of living crystal, with faceted eyes that reflected light like diamonds. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. Human captain, you have committed an act of war against the Centauri Empire. Surrender immediately, and we will make your death quick. Morrison leaned back in his chair. Commander, you were about to murder 300 innocent civilians. In human law, that's called genocide. Withdraw your ships, and we'll consider this a misunderstanding. The Centauri commander's crystal face showed no emotion, but Morrison could tell the alien was angry. You do not understand the situation, human. This is a war zone. All ships not aligned with the Centauri Empire are potential enemies. We cannot allow them to carry intelligence to the Vulcan forces. Those are refugees, Morrison replied. Families with children. They're not spies or soldiers. In war, there is no such distinction, the Centauri said. You have interfered with Centauri military operations. Prepare to face justice. The transmission ended. Morrison watched as the remaining Centauri ships began to circle the Liberty and the refugee vessel. They were trying to get into position for a killing shot. Captain, Dr. Phillips said from her station, I'm reading massive energy buildup from both ships. They're preparing to fire everything they have. Morrison thought quickly. The Liberty was fast, but not fast enough to outrun. Energy beams. The refugee ship was too damaged to move. If they stayed here, everyone would die. Bobby, can you get a torpedo lock on that big asteroid behind us? Chung checked his targeting computer. Yes, sir, but I don't understand what good that will do. Trust me, Morrison said. Fire 2 torpedoes at the asteroid's base. Amy, send a message to the refugee ship telling them to hold on tight. The torpedoes streaked toward the massive rock that had been hiding the Liberty. They exploded at the asteroid's narrow end, breaking it free from the gravitational anchor that held it in place. The asteroid began to move, slowly at first, then faster as it fell toward the planet below. It was huge, bigger than most moons. And when it started moving, it created a gravitational wake that pulled everything nearby along with it. All ships are being pulled toward the planet, Sean reported. The asteroid's gravity is affecting everyone in the area. Morrison smiled, including us, but we expected it. They didn't. The Centauri ships tried to escape the gravitational pull, but their elegant crystal designs were not built for this kind of situation. They began tumbling toward the planet, their weapons firing wildly as they struggled to regain control. The Liberty used its mining thrusters to break free from the asteroids. Pull, pushing away from the planet with controlled bursts of power. The refugee ship, still damaged but lighter than the crystal vessels, was able to follow the Liberty's lead. We're clear, Jackson reported. The Centauri ships are still falling toward the planet, but they should be able to recover before they hit the atmosphere. Morrison nodded. He didn't want to kill the Centauri crew, just stop them from murdering civilians. Amy, open a channel to all ships in the area. When the communication link was established, Morrison spoke clearly and calmly. This is Captain Morrison of the human vessel Liberty. Let this be a message to both the Centauri Empire and the Vulcan Confederacy. Humanity will not stand by and watch innocent people be killed. Any ship that targets civilians will answer to us. The channel went quiet for a moment. Then Captain Vex of the refugee ship spoke up. Human Captain, you have saved 300 lives today. The Galactic Refugee Council will remember this. Another voice joined the conversation, speaking in the flowing musical language of the Vulcans. The computer translated, Human vessel. This is Commander Zara of the Vulcan Third Fleet. We have monitored your actions. The Confederacy offers alliance and friendship to any species brave enough to protect the innocent. But it was the final transmission that surprised Morrison the most. The Centauri commander, his ship now under control, but limping away from the planet, sent one last message. Human Captain, you fight without honor, using tricks and deceptions. But you fight for a worthy cause. The Empire will remember this day, and we will be watching your species with great interest. As the alien ships scattered, Morrison looked around his bridge. His crew was smiling, proud of what they had accomplished. But Morrison knew that everything had just changed. Amy, send a message to Earth Command, he said. Tell them that humanity is no longer neutral in this war. The message reached Earth in 3 days. Admiral Lisa Hayes sat in her office reading Captain Morrison's report for the 5th time. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she didn't notice. The implications of what had happened in the Kepler system were enormous. "Ma'am," her aide said from the doorway, "the President is here to see you." President Daniel Carter walked into the office, followed by General Susan Clark from the Defense Department. Carter looked tired, which was normal for someone who had been running the country during humanity's first contact with alien civilizations. "Admiral," Carter said, sitting down across from Hayes, "I need to understand exactly what Captain Morrison has gotten us into." Hayes activated the holographic display in the center of her office. It showed a map of local space with red and blue markers indicating Zentari and Vulcan territories. The area where Morrison had intervened was marked with a yellow dot. "Mr. President, Captain Morrison saved 300 civilian lives," Hayes said. "But in doing so, he made humanity a player in this galactic war. Both sides now see us as either potential allies or enemies." General Clark leaned forward, studying the display. "What kind of military assets are we looking at? How many ships do they have?" "The Zentari Empire controls about 200 star systems," Hayes replied. "Intelligence estimates suggest they have over 10,000 warships, ranging from patrol boats to planet killers. The Vulcan Confederacy is smaller, maybe 80 systems, but their ships are harder to count because they grow new ones as needed." Carter whistled softly. "And we have 12 exploration ships." 14 now, Hayes corrected. "We just finished the USS Defiance and the USS Harmony. Both are equipped with the new mining railguns and improved shielding. 14 ships against 10,000, Clark said. "That's not a war, that's suicide." Hayes pulled up another display showing Earth shipyards. "Sir, we're not built for war. Our ships are designed for exploration, mining, and scientific research. The weapons they carry are meant for breaking up asteroids, not fighting alien battleships." But Carter was thinking about something else. Admiral, in his report, Morrison, said he used an asteroid as a weapon. He didn't try to fight the Zentari ships directly. He outsmarted them. "Yes, sir. Captain Morrison has always been creative in his problem-solving approach." "What if that's our advantage?" Carter asked. "We can't match their numbers or their technology, but maybe we can think differently than they do." General Clark looked skeptical. "Mr. President, creative thinking won't stop a planet-killer beam." "Maybe not," Carter replied, "but it might prevent them from firing it in the first place." 3 weeks later, the first human battle group jumped into the war zone. Admiral Tony Garcia commanded the small fleet from the heavy cruiser USS Defiance. The ship was bigger than the Liberty, with thicker armor and more powerful weapons, but it still looked tiny compared to the alien warships surrounding it. Garcia had been Morrison's instructor at the Space Academy 15 years ago. He was known for unconventional tactics and for winning battles that should have been impossible. If anyone could figure out how to fight a war with 14 ships, it was him. "Captain Morrison," Garcia said over the communication link, "bring the Liberty alongside. We need to talk." Morrison had been promoted to Commodore and given command of 6 destroyers. His flagship was still the Liberty, but now it was surrounded by sister ships with names like Freedom, Justice, and Hope. All of them carried the new weapons that Earth's engineers had been developing. The two men met in Garcia's ready room aboard the Defiance. Garcia poured coffee from a pot that he claimed made the best brew in human space. Morrison took a sip and had to agree. "Jake," Garcia said, using Morrison's first name like he had when Morrison was a cadet, "we need to establish our position in this war quickly. Both sides are watching us, trying to figure out what we're capable of." Morrison nodded. "The Vulcans have been sending diplomatic messages every day. They want a formal alliance." The Centauri are more cautious, but they're not shooting at us anymore. What's your assessment of their military capabilities? Morrison had been thinking about this question for weeks. The Centauri are like an ancient army, sir. They follow rules that have worked for thousands of years. Their formations are beautiful and precise, but they're predictable. The Vulcans are the opposite. They adapt quickly, but they don't plan very far ahead. Garcia smiled, and neither side fights like humans. No, sir. We're the only species that seems to use the environment as a weapon. Garcia activated a holographic display showing recent battle recordings. I've been studying their tactics. The Centauri always attack in geometric formations. Triangles, squares, perfect circles. The Vulcans swarm like insects, but they follow biological patterns that can be predicted if you understand animal behavior. Morrison watched the alien ships moving through space. They're both fighting the way their ancestors taught them. Centauri follow military tradition. The Vulcans follow genetic programming. But humans, Garcia said, learn from everyone and follow no one. That's going to be our edge. The test came 2 days later. A Centauri battle group was attacking a Vulcan supply convoy near the Tau Ceti system. 50 crystal ships were arranged in a perfect sphere around 30 bioships that were trying to escape. It should have been a quick victory for the Centauri. Then the human fleet arrived. Garcia's ships didn't attack the Centauri formation directly. Instead, they scattered into the asteroid belt that surrounded Tau Ceti's outer planets. The human ships were small enough to hide among the rocks, and their gray hulls made them hard to spot against the dark asteroids. All ships, Garcia broadcast, execute plan slingshot. The human destroyers began pushing asteroids out of their orbits, using mining equipment to change the rock's trajectory. Soon, dozens of asteroids were falling toward the planet, creating a moving obstacle course that the Centauri formation couldn't navigate without breaking up. Commander Beth Adams, captain of the destroyer USS Justice, reported her position. Admiral, we're in position behind asteroid cluster 7. The Centauri ships are having trouble maintaining formation. Garcia watched his tactical display as the perfect Centauri sphere began to distort. The crystal ships were trying to avoid the falling asteroids while maintaining their attack on the Vulcan convoy. But they couldn't do both. Now, Garcia ordered, the human ships emerged from the asteroid belt, firing their railguns at the Centauri vessels. But they weren't aiming for the ships themselves. They were targeting the spaces between them, filling those gaps with metal projectiles and debris. The Centauri formation collapsed. Ships that had been perfectly aligned were now scattered across thousands of kilometers, unable to coordinate their attacks. Some were spinning out of control after colliding with asteroids. Others were trying to reform, but the constant rain of debris made it impossible. Captain Lucy Turner of the USS Hope reported success. Admiral, the Centauri commander is requesting a ceasefire. The Vulcan convoy is safely away. Garcia opened a channel to the Centauri flagship. The alien commander appeared on his screen, its crystal face reflecting the emergency lights from its damaged bridge. Human Admiral, the Centauri said, you fight in a way we do not understand. You use the battlefield itself as a weapon. Commander, Garcia replied, we use whatever works. Your ships are beautiful, and your formations are perfect, but perfection can be a weakness in war. The Centauri commander considered this. You offer wisdom. Perhaps there is more to learn from your species than we first believed. After the Centauri ships limped away, Garcia received a transmission from the Vulcan convoy. Commander Zara's bioship appeared on his screen, its living hull pulsing with different colors. Admiral Garcia, Zara said, your tactics saved our supply ships and our crews. The Confederacy formally requests an alliance with humanity. Garcia looked around his bridge. His crew was tired but proud. They had just fought their first real battle against an enemy with superior numbers and technology, and they had won without destroying a single ship. "Commander Zara," Garcia said, "humanity accepts your offer of alliance. But we fight this war our way." As the human fleet regrouped, Garcia knew that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer just watching the Galactic War. They were now a major player, and both sides would have to learn new ways of thinking if they wanted to survive. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic War. The conflict that had once seemed endless was beginning to change. Human tactics were spreading through the Vulcan fleet as their crews learned to think in new ways. The Zentari, proud of their ancient traditions, were starting to question whether their perfect formations were actually perfect at all. Admiral Tony Garcia stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, looking at the tactical display that showed the most important battle of the war. The Zentari had built a massive fortress in the Alpha Centauri system, a collection of crystal structures that could destroy entire fleets. If the Allies could capture it, the war would be over. If they failed, the fighting could continue for decades. Commodore Jake Morrison's voice came over the communication system from his ship, the USS Vengeance. Morrison had been given a new battleship, bigger and more powerful than the Liberty, but he still preferred to lead from the front. "Admiral," Morrison said, "long-range sensors show the Zentari have at least 300 ships defending this fortress. Commander Zara reports that the Vulcan fleet has 200 bioships ready for assault." Garcia nodded. "And we have 24 human ships. On paper, we're badly outnumbered." "But we're not fighting on paper," Morrison replied with a smile in his voice. The Centauri fortress was a marvel of engineering. Massive crystal towers floated in perfect formation around Alpha Centauri's 4th planet. Each tower was the size of a small moon, armed with weapons that could crack worlds in half. At the center was the command palace where Admiral Kethvor, the Unyielding, had never lost a battle. Nancy Brooks stood in the Marine briefing room aboard the Vengeance, addressing her assault teams. Brooks had been a soldier for 15 years before joining the Space Marines, and she understood how to fight in impossible situations. "Listen up," Brooks said to her troops. "The Zentari expect us to attack their command center directly. That's what every enemy has tried for the past 1,000 years. Instead, we're going to hit their power grid and let physics do our work for us." Private First Class Kevin Murphy raised his hand. He was young, barely 20, but he had already proven himself in 3 boarding actions. "Ma'am, how do we get close enough to plant the charges without being detected?" Brooks smiled. "We're going to hide in plain sight, Murphy. The Zentari use crystal formations for everything. Their sensors are designed to ignore small pieces of crystal floating in space. We're going to disguise our assault pods as debris from previous battles." Meanwhile, Garcia was coordinating with his alien allies. Commander Zira's bioship appeared on his screen, its living hull changing colors as it communicated. "Admiral Garcia," Zara said, "our bioships are ready to begin the assault. But the Centauri defensive grid is too strong for a direct attack. We need a new strategy." Garcia had been thinking about this problem for weeks. "Commander, what if we don't attack the grid at all? What if we make it work against them?" Captain Ryan Bell, Garcia's tactical officer, brought up a detailed scan of the fortress. "Sir, the Zentari have positioned their defensive platforms to create overlapping fields of fire. No ship can approach without being targeted by multiple platforms simultaneously." "Exactly," Garcia said. "But what happens if those platforms start targeting each other?" Bell looked confused for a moment, then his eyes widened with understanding. "If we can disrupt their identification systems, they might mistake each other for enemy ships." Garcia turned to his communications officer. "Lieutenant Williams, do we still have those Zentari communication codes that we captured last month?" Lieutenant Sandra Williams checked her computer. Yes, sir, but they're probably outdated by now. That's perfect, Garcia said. I want you to broadcast fake targeting data using those old codes. Make it look like some of the defensive platforms have been captured by Vulcan forces. The battle began at dawn, ship time. The Zentari fleet moved out to meet the approaching human and Vulcan forces, their crystal ships forming perfect geometric patterns that had won wars for millennia. But this time, their enemies were not following the ancient rules of space combat. Human ships scattered in all directions, seeming to flee from the Zentari advance. The aliens pursued them, breaking their perfect formations to chase individual targets. This was exactly what Garcia had hoped for. All human ships, Garcia broadcast, execute Operation Chaos. The fleeing human ships suddenly reversed course, but instead of attacking the Zentari vessels, they began pushing asteroids and space debris toward the fortress. Soon, the space around Alpha Centauri was filled with flying rocks, making it impossible for anyone to see clearly. Captain Beth Adams of the USS Justice reported from inside the debris field. Admiral, we're in position. The Zentari can't track us through all this junk. At the same time, Lieutenant Williams began broadcasting the fake targeting data. The outdated Zentari codes were just different enough to confuse the fortress computers. Within minutes, several defensive platforms were marking each other as hostile targets. Admiral Kethvar watched from his command palace as his perfect defensive grid began to malfunction. Weapons platforms that had protected Alpha Centauri for centuries were suddenly firing at each other, their crystal cores exploding in brilliant flashes of light. Impossible, Kethvar said to his aide. Our systems cannot malfunction. They are perfect. His aide checked the tactical display. Sir, it appears that some of our platforms have been captured by the enemy and reprogrammed. Kethvar's crystal face showed no emotion, but inside he was confused and angry. How could the enemy capture platforms that were surrounded by his fleet? How could perfect systems suddenly become imperfect? The answer came when Captain Brooks's Marines made their move. The assault pods, disguised as crystal debris, had floated undetected through the defensive grid. Now they attached themselves to the fortress's power generators, deep inside the structure where sensors couldn't detect them. Charges planted, Brooks reported to Morrison. All teams are in position. Morrison opened a channel to Garcia. Admiral, we're ready to bring down their power grid. Garcia looked at his tactical display. The Zentari fleet was scattered, chasing human ships through the debris field. The defensive platforms were half destroyed, victims of their own confused targeting. Systems. The Vulcan bioships were moving into attack position, ready to assault the weakened fortress. Do it, Garcia said. The explosions came from inside the fortress, where no attack was supposed to be possible. The power generators that had fed energy to the crystal towers for 1,000 years suddenly went dark. Without power, the massive structures began to fall toward the planet below, their artificial gravity systems failing. Admiral Kethvar felt his command palace shudder as it lost power. Emergency lights came on, casting strange shadows across his crystal features. For the first time in his long military career, he was losing a battle. Human Admiral, Kethvar said over the communication system, you fight without honor. You use deception and trickery instead of honest combat. Garcia's reply was calm and professional. Admiral Kethvar, we fight to win and to minimize casualties. On all sides. Honor is protecting innocent life, not following ancient traditions. As the fortress fell apart around him, Kethvar finally understood what his enemy was trying to tell him. The humans didn't fight to prove their strength or to follow ancient customs. They fought to solve problems and end conflicts as quickly as possible. All Zentari ships, Kethvar broadcast, Cease fire and withdraw. The fortress is lost. Commander Zara's bioship appeared on Garcia's screen, its hull glowing with triumph. Admiral, the Zentari fleet is retreating. The battle is won. But Garcia was already thinking about what came next. Commander, send a message to Admiral Kethfer. Tell him we'd like to discuss terms for ending this war. Morrison joined the conversation from the Vengeance. Admiral, do you think they'll listen? Garcia watched the Zentari ships gathering their survivors and preparing to leave. Jake, I think we just taught them that there's more than one way to fight a war. Maybe now we can teach them that there's more than one way to make peace. As the human fleet regrouped around the ruins of the fortress, Garcia knew that the galaxy was about to change forever. The age of endless war was ending, and the age of human diplomacy was about to begin. The peace talks took place on Kepler Prime, a neutral world that had managed to stay out of the Galactic War. Representatives from 47 different species came to watch as the three most powerful military forces in the galaxy tried to find a way to stop fighting each other. Admiral Tony, Garcia sat at the negotiating table between Admiral Kethvar of the Zentari, Empire, and Commander Zara of the Vulcan Confederacy. The room was quiet except for the soft humming of translation computers working to turn thoughts into words that everyone could understand. President Daniel Carter had flown out from Earth to attend the talks personally. He sat behind Garcia, along with several other human diplomats who were still learning how to speak with alien civilizations. Dr. Karen Phillips was there too, serving as humanities expert on alien psychology. The question before us, Garcia said, opening the first session, is not who won or lost this war. The question is how we can make sure it never happens again. Admiral Kethvar's crystal face reflected the lights in the conference room. His ship had been damaged in the battle at Alpha Centauri, and he still wore the scars of defeat. But his voice was steady when he spoke. For 3,000 years, the Zentari Empire has maintained order through strength and discipline. When we encountered the Vulcan Confederacy, we offered them the same order. They refused, and war was the result. Commander Zara's bioship skin changed colors as she responded, shifting from blue to green to express her emotions. The Confederacy values freedom and growth. When the Empire demanded that we follow their ancient laws, we had no choice but to resist. Life cannot be forced into rigid patterns. Garcia listened to both sides, then looked around the room at all the alien delegates who were watching. With respect to both of you, I think you are fighting the wrong war. Kethvar's crystal eyes focused on Garcia. Explain. You were fighting each other, Garcia said. But the real enemy was the war itself. Every battle made peace harder to achieve. Every destroyed ship made both sides more angry. The longer it went on, the more impossible it became to stop. Dr. Phillips stood up and activated a holographic display showing casualty statistics from the war. The numbers were staggering. Billions of lives lost, hundreds of worlds damaged, entire star systems turned into graveyards. Admiral Kethvar, Phillips said, your people value order and tradition. But this war was destroying both. Your perfect formations couldn't protect your colonies. Your ancient strategies couldn't win decisive victories. She turned to Commander Zara. And Commander, your people value adaptation and growth. But the war was forcing you to become more like your enemies. Your bioships were being modified for destruction instead of creation. Zara's skin turned a thoughtful purple color. The human speaks truth. We have spent so much energy fighting that we have forgotten how to build. The same is true for us, Kethvar admitted. Our crystal gardens have withered while we focused on growing warships. Garcia leaned forward. That's why humanity got involved. We saw two great civilizations destroying themselves and each other over differences that didn't need to be solved with violence. A delegate from the Rigel Commonwealth, a small government that had lost 3 colonies to the fighting, spoke up. "But humans, you solved the problem with more violence." "How is that different?" Garcia smiled. "We didn't fight the war the same way they did. We fought to end it, not to win it." Captain Jake Morrison, who had been promoted to Rear Admiral after the victory at Alpha Centauri, entered the room carrying a datapad. His new flagship, the USS Harmony, was in orbit above the planet with a mixed crew of humans, Centauri, and Vulcans. "Admirals," Morrison said, "I have the preliminary reports from our joint patrol missions. The results might interest everyone here." Morrison activated the holographic display and showed recent patrol routes through the former war zone. Human, Centauri, and Vulcan ships were working together to hunt down pirates and rescue refugees from destroyed colonies. "In the past month," Morrison reported, "our joint patrols have saved over 50,000 civilian lives and restored order to 12 star systems. The mixed crews are learning to combine their different approaches to problem solving." "Commander." Zara's skin brightened to a happy yellow. "Our bioengineers are working with Centauri crystal shapers to create new types of rescue ships. The designs are beautiful and efficient." Admiral Kethfor nodded slowly. "And our tactical computers are being improved by human creativity and Vulcan adaptability. We are discovering solutions that none of us could find alone." Garcia stood up and walked to the large window that showed the stars outside. "That's the real lesson of this war. None of our species is complete by itself. The Centauri have wisdom and discipline. The Vulcans have creativity and growth. Humans have adaptability and problem-solving skills. When we work together, we're stronger than when we fight each other." President Carter joined Garcia at the window. "The galaxy is big enough for all of us to grow and prosper. But it's not big enough for the kind of war you are fighting." Over the next 3 days, the delegates worked out the details of what would become known as the Kepler Accords. The Centauri Empire would maintain its traditional structure, but would allow member worlds to choose their own local governments. The Vulcan Confederacy would continue to grow and adapt, but would respect the territorial boundaries of other species. Most importantly, humanity would serve as mediators for future disputes. Human diplomats and military advisors would be stationed throughout both territories, helping to solve problems before they became wars. Dr. Phillips was appointed as the first director of interspecies relations. Her job was to study how different alien cultures could work together without losing their unique characteristics. "The key," Phillips explained to the assembled delegates, "is understanding that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. Each species brings something unique to the galactic community." Captain Nancy Brooks, now commanding the Marine detachment aboard the Harmony, reported on the success of mixed military units. Human Marines are learning Centauri discipline and Vulcan adaptation techniques. Centauri soldiers are discovering human creativity. Vulcan warriors are finding value in human tactical thinking. Together, we're becoming something new. Admiral Kethfor stood up for his final statement to the conference. "When this war began, I believed that strength came from perfection and uniformity. The humans have taught me that true strength comes from diversity and cooperation. The Centauri Empire formally accepts the Kepler Accords." Commander Zara's bioship skin cycled through all the colors of the spectrum as she spoke. "The Vulcan Confederacy has learned that growth and adaptation are better when guided by wisdom and planning. We too accept these accords." Garcia looked around the room at delegates from dozens of species, all of them representing worlds that had suffered during the war. "Then let's make sure this is the last galactic war we ever have to fight." 6 months later, Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Harmony, watching a joint training exercise between human, Centauri, and Vulcan ships. The crews were practicing rescue operations in asteroid fields, combining the best techniques. from all three species. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker, now captain of his own ship, reported over the communication system. "Admiral, the exercise is complete. All civilian ships were successfully rescued with 0 casualties." Morrison smiled as he watched the different ship types working together. The elegant crystal formations of the Centauri, the flowing organic shapes of the Vulcan bioships, and the practical angular designs of human vessels moved through space like a well-choreographed dance. "Good work, everyone," Morrison said. "Return to base for debriefing." As the ships headed home, Morrison thought about how much had changed. Since that day when he first saw the alien fleets destroying each other, the galaxy was no longer consumed by war. Trade routes were reopening, colonies were being rebuilt, and new friendships were forming between species that had once been enemies. The war had been terrible, but it had taught everyone an important lesson. The galaxy was too big and too beautiful to waste on fighting. There were new worlds to explore, new technologies to develop, and new forms of life to discover. But all of that was only possible when people worked together instead of tearing each other apart. Humanity had brought more than ships and weapons to the Galactic War. They had brought a new way of thinking that made peace possible. And in a galaxy full of ancient civilizations, sometimes the newest voice was exactly what everyone needed to hear.